So welcome, and we have 30 minutes for this great and interesting talk about social emotional learning.
So hi everybody, it is a beautiful day in the neighborhood, isn't it? I'm Paul Siefken, I'm from the Fred Rogers Company, and on behalf of Jesse and Angela, I want to thank you for inviting us to come and talk to you today about Daniel Tiger's neighborhood. Before we get started, I do want to ask, how many people in the audience have seen an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on television? That's what I thought. Based on the response to Jesse's image on his slide last night, I thought we'd get a pretty good response. How many people have seen an episode of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood on television? Oh, that's great. Excellent. How many people have seen it on streaming video? Excellent. How many people have played one of the games? One of the apps? One of the interactive storybooks? Read one of the actual books? Played with one of the toys? Media has changed. Children's media has changed since Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. There's a lot of different ways that kids can access it. And so, you know, Daniel has been extremely popular. It's not only one of the top 10 programs for preschoolers on television, it also averages about 37 million streams per month. And most of those are on mobile platforms through PBS mobile app. It also is averaging, well actually so far almost, more than 500,000 apps have been downloaded for Daniel Tiger, and it averages more than 1 million unique visitors every month on the website. So Daniel has been extremely popular. The one thing that we actually have to think about a lot though, despite the change and the popularity of the new show, is at the Fred Rogers Company, we're committed to making sure that the legacy of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood lives on. And so everything that we do for Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, we really make sure that Fred's curiosity and his wonder and his humanity is instilled into every episode, every game, every app, everything that we do. We also do have to keep in mind that Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood is new. And for children, they don't have the context, somebody was just talking about context, of the legacy of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. They can't rely on, oh, this is just like what Mr. Rogers said. So we challenge ourselves to make Daniel Tiger mean as much to kids today as Mr. Rogers means to, I think it was about 99% of the people in this room from when they were children. Some of the things that we do to sort of focus on Fred Rogers' legacy is to focus on some of the things that are sometimes overlooked about him. One of them was that he was an innovator in interactive media. He was one of the first people to ever talk directly to the screen, and kids really responded to that, and that was a real innovation. Second, I think people forget that he was an incredibly creative talent. He wrote and starred in and composed for hundreds of episodes of television. So a remarkable man. He was also an innovator in terms of the idea of media literacy. He was one of the first people, I think, to acknowledge the power that media has to influence people, particularly young people, in the way they see the world. And he not only realized that for himself, but he challenged fellow producers to think about making responsible content in whatever they did because of the power that we wield. So finally, he was also somebody who was committed to excellence, not only in the message, but in the execution. He was an absolute perfectionist. So when we think about all those things at the Fred Rogers Company, it's time for us to look for partners. And when we're looking for partners, we are looking for creative innovators who understand the significance of what we're making and are striving for excellence. And that's another way of saying we're looking for people who care, to reference Jesse's talk last night. And when it came to decide who was going to make the interactive games for Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, we were lucky enough to be able to look right down the street in Pittsburgh to Schell Games, where Jesse and his team have created, I think, a new wave of transformational gaming for young people. And the more that we work with Jesse, the more that we think that his approach to gaming is very similar to something that the way that Fred Rogers approached television. He breaks it down to the fundamentals, and he really wants kids to engage at their level and then to have fun. And in that way, we really appreciate working with Jessie. But Jessie's going to talk in a little bit. My job is to also introduce Angela Santomero. Angela is a legend in children's television. She made her mark with Blue's Clues and then Super Y. And Angela is really the person who had the vision to bring Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood to life. And it is because of that that we're able to bring the Fred Rogers experience of genuine social emotional learning and lessons to kids, and it's because of Angela. She has all the qualities of a partner that we look for, and I think that she's also going to tell us that she has a little bit of Mr. Rogers' psychic DNA in her. She's going to tell you a little bit about her history. But before we get to that, I'm supposed to run a clip, and then I'm going to hand it off to Angela. Is that right? Thank you. Mic over here.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor?
It's Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, a land of make-believe. Won't you ride along with me?
Right along.
It's Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, so much to do, so much to see. Won't you ride along with me?
Right along.
I've got lots of friends for you to meet in this land of make-believe. A friendly face on every street just waiting to greet you. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor in Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
Yay. Great. Okay. So that's me, and I was that preschooler who could not sit any closer to the TV when Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was on. And we hang these photos of ourselves at 4 in the office to remind us of the audience that we're trying to reach. But I grew up in the Mr. Rogers neighborhood. I'm totally dating myself, and you all will see that, but in the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood and Sesame Street generation. And as I got older, I was 14 when my little brother was born, and I was fascinated by the fact that he was obsessed with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and would get up and kick at the screen, and he was obsessed with video games. And I grew up watching him play all of this and wanted to understand how to bring it back to the shows that completely and utterly fascinated me. Can we get kids to think? Can we get the kids to want to change the world and talk with our characters on TV and harness the power of media in a positive way? And so, truth be told, when I talk about my experiences with Fred Rogers, it starts to feel like I was stalking him. But the truth is, I did want to research what was his background. And so he has a master's in child development. I ended up having the same thing and really wanted to study how we can use media to bring the very best of a curriculum onto television the way that Fred did. And I definitely analyzed his program, which inspired me in so many ways to create Blue's Clues. And so the opportunity to then be able to take Fred's legacy forward was just probably more than my head could handle at the time. I was very excited about it, and as you can see when you watch the program, one of my favorite things that people say about it is there's so many nods of love to Fred in there. So I am going to talk you through a few of the points of what Fred Rogers taught me that I think could definitely impact the work that you all do. The first is this idea of the power of a strong vision. Now, do I hit this in order for the video to play? Is that how that works? Do we know? Do you know how I get the video to play? Thank you. Oops. Where?
Is this the video?
It's embedded within the, up here, in this one. Yeah, right in there.
It's not.
She told me it worked.
Is it one of these videos? It was working earlier. Sorry.
Okay.
Why do you have to drag it to the external monitor? Yes, you need to play it. What's an image?
Is it image?
They said it was playing.
This is it.
We practiced it. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. We just practiced that it was embedded within there, but it's not playing.
It's an image. We have a YouTube clip.
You have the YouTube link right there.
If that's already. It's in my flow now. Oh, we're going to play it on YouTube. That's fancy. How about we just keep going? That's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Here.
Yeah, that's what we thought.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. Now I have to get back here. Wait, he left.
Can you guys get the PowerPoint back? We'll just keep rolling.
All right, sorry about that. That video clip is Fred on that YouTube, one of his last declarations to the audience, empowering us who watched his show as kids, as adults, and the power that we have and what we need to do in terms of going out there and educating kids. And so really what Fred obviously was all about is respecting children. And so the idea that he had a socio-emotional curriculum, which he had perfected over 40 years, is something that we work with Paul and everybody at the Fred Rogers Company to employ within Daniel Tiger's neighborhood. And what that means is that we want to speak to them in a way that shows how smart we think that they are. And we want to take the socio-emotional curriculum and put that into active strategies that we want them to then take with them in their everyday life. So when they're participating in the show, which is the way we talk about the show, they're not just watching, they're actually having a relationship with Daniel Tiger, who talks directly to the audience the way that Fred did, and he has a situation where he uses these strategies, and we carefully script them so that kids can repeat them back. And we're so excited to hear how widely successful the show is, but how much parents and kids are using these strategies. The idea of how to make that work is all about the best way to know about kids is to talk with them. And Fred was obviously genius at this through the screen way back when. He really made you feel that he was talking to you. And that, for me, changed my life in the sense of thinking about this medium as interactively as possible. Because truth be told, I want television to feel like a game. I want it to feel that you have, especially for this age group who believes in this fantasy reality distinction is a little bit more difficult for them. In the positive, they feel as if that they're participating, and that's really exciting. And then when we can scaffold it for real with what the work that Jesse's doing, it brings it all together. But the way in which we make sure that we can stay true to Fred's vision and to really create strategies with handles is that we go in and we talk to kids. So there are about 3 different times within the course of a production that we're actually going in, talking about the iterative process, that we go in and we make sure that the scripts are working. Because we can say that it's going to change the world and we can say we've got this great curriculum, but unless we see that after 11 minutes that the kids are grasping these concepts, we don't stop working and rewriting and perfecting it. And so this idea of play is the other piece of it, because that's what we all do. We know that play is the work of the child. We know that if they're participating, if they're having fun, if they're engaging, and they're actually hands-on as much as we can do with TV, hands-on learning, that they're going to be able to generalize it into their real world. So everything comes from this playful spirit and this bonding and this point of view in terms of the story that Fred completely taught us in terms of that respect for kids and that interactivity. And passion is contagious. This idea, I have a whole team, and we all have this idea that if we have this passion to put socio-emotional skills within a show, and it's a 7-layer cake, and every time we start a new project, we think, how are we going to put all of this into 11 minutes or into 22 minutes, that what we're hoping creates a brand and a world and characters that our audience really want to befriend. That way, we can then have all of those extensions that everyone can do that really can bring it to another place. And so that sense of having that strong vision and being able to hold on to Fred's vision from 40 years ago, and that 40 plus years ago, that we can keep going. So thank you.
Okay, wonderful. You can imagine how exciting it was for me when we were approached by these guys to help make the games. Certainly, I've been a lifelong Fred Rogers fan. He's been an incredible inspiration to me. And then on top of that, just Angela with Blue's Clues, I had been so impressed when that show came out, and I'd been a huge fan of it. I mean, look at my notebook, for God's sake, right? Yeah. Anyway, so we've had an opportunity to make some of the Daniel Tiger games. I'm going to show you, hopefully, we'll see if the video cooperates, hopefully show you a short montage here of the games, and then I'll talk about some of the lessons learned. I may need an assist getting this video to play, but I'm going to try clicking it and we'll see what happens. There we go.
Thanks, Charlie. A tongue depressor. It's hard to talk with a tongue depressor in my mouth. Feeling mad.
It's kind of a music game here about expressing emotion.
That's a tigerfish. Sometimes he goes fast, and sometimes he goes slow. Just like me. Hi, neighbor. I'm playing make-believe. We can play together. I'm Cowboy Daniel in the jungle. That was a terrific treat. Hoo-hoo. May I have another? Hoo-hoo, thanks, neighbor.
Super Stanley closes his eyes.
It's time to rest your head. Good night, Daniel. Good night.
The end.
Dream of the fun we had.
Superheroes go to bed too.
Anyway, so that gives you a sense of just some of the different games we've done. We've done half a dozen games so far, and we're working on 3 new ones. And you can see it's quite a variety of different games and different topics and different perspectives that we were able to address. So we learned a lot of things when we were working on this, and I just wanted to share some of our big lessons learned, because for us, this was the first time working with such a young demographic. We had Schell Games, we had made a number of games for ages 6 to 12, and we thought we kind of had we thought, yeah, we got it. We know kids. We understand this. And these guys came and said, no, we're doing this is about ages 2 to 5, with the heart of it being 3 years old. That's the center of the demographic, and that was a very new experience for us, and we learned a great deal. So some of our big lessons, I think, first one was make toys, not games. Until kids are about coming up on 5, games are actually not very interesting to them. But toys are very interesting to them. And it is a bit of an unusual perspective to take as a video game designer. Who says video toy designer? That's not even a thing, right? But when you shift your perspective and think, how can we make this more of a toy? So you saw, for example, that trolley game where the trolley runs around. It really is much more of a toy. There's no points, there's no winning or losing. You just have the ability to run the trolley around and pick people up and drop them off however you like and however you care to do it. And that seems to be the engagement that kids that age they enjoy most, they stay with most, and in some ways, we see they kind of appreciate it, because when younger children try and play video games, they're often frustrated by all the failure. And now suddenly here's a place where they can just have the joy of interacting without having to worry about failing. Now, we were very focused on, it sounds so old-fashioned now, but we're focused on a mouse and keyboard interface, and this is part of the PBS mission. Even though it's much easier to make apps for 2-year-olds, because it's easier for them to use and understand them, that is still a luxury platform. And the goal of PBS is to reach all the children, not just the rich children. And so by focusing on initially on mouse and keyboard, we reach more kids. But it's challenging because a 3-year-old plus a mouse, oh my gosh, that's what we're finding again and again is many of the kids, this is the very first time they've ever used a mouse playing our games. And so we have to keep it very, very simple. And some kids aren't ready to use the mouse, but the keyboard's right in front of them. They can't help but touch it. And so we said, well, why don't we support that too? So every game that we make, we'll do interesting things with the mouse and do interesting things with the keyboard. And an interesting side effect that we didn't really see coming but showed up in our play testing was that very often you'll have 2 siblings. And the older one will work the mouse and the younger one will bang on the keyboard, and they're fine with that. You know, that music game, for example, all the different keys do different things and the mouse does different things, and it works out fine, but you do have to plan for it. And it feels weird as a game designer to kind of give that much control away, but it's what the kids really like. When we were first challenged with, okay, these are going to be social emotional games, that's challenging, right? Sure, colors, shapes, numbers, animals, sure. Like that, I get that. I get how to make games about that. But yeah, no, we're going to make a game about how you feel when you're jealous of your brother. That's harder. And initially, we had lofty ideas, and then we started working, oh my God, these are so hard. I don't know if we can really turn these into a game for a 3-year-old, a game about frustration. I don't know if I can really make this work. And what we started to realize was social emotional doesn't have to be all up in the emotional all the time. You saw some of the games we had there. The trolley game, for example, you might say, well, that's not a social emotional game. You're just driving a trolley around, picking people up and dropping them off. Well, public transportation is something that young children often have to deal with, and they're a little nervous about it. It's weird, it's scary, there's all these strangers, and giving them a chance to play with this as a bus route and see how it works, how it goes in a loop, and people wait in order to get picked up, and then they have a destination and they get dropped off. It is a kind of social emotional learning, getting ready for the world. You saw our doctor game. The idea of going to the doctor and him putting cold things in your ears is a very this is a scary thing for children, and giving them a chance to play with what it's like to be at the doctor gives them more control over it. So not every social emotional game has to be like up in your face about emotions. It can be about helping you adapt to the world in a social emotional way. And this is one that we have to say to ourselves all the time. We try and make good judgments. We have our little meetings about what we are and aren't going to do in the games. And our judgments are fine, but we are not 3 years old. We can't even remember what it's like to be 3. I can tell you all about things that happened in 2nd grade, but the things I liked when I was 3, that's not a thing. But Paul introduced me to the term infantile amnesia, which I had never heard of this, but that's the name for it. And so the only way to do it is to get in front of the kids. We have a great relationship with the Pittsburgh Children's Museum, and once a week we take our new builds, because there is an infinite supply of 2 to 5-year-olds there, and parents who are excited to kind of have the kids try it out. So that's incredibly helpful to us, because again and again we see that our judgments of what we think is going to work often what actually works is sometimes the opposite of that. Now, with our new round of games, we have switched from working purely in Flash and purely for web browsers to HTML5. And the reason that we've done that is this has been very much a PBS initiative, is because parents mostly don't really think about, they're not very technically oriented. They looked at a web page on their laptop. Now they want to look at their web page on their iPad. And from their point of view, this web page is broken. And they don't understand that Steve Jobs had a deep hatred of Flash, and he's managed to take it with him to the grave, and has lasted beyond the grave. And they don't understand that, and they don't care. All they see is PBS's website is broken. And so the notion is, let's do this with responsive HTML5. Let's do our games that way so we can have them on the browser and on tablets and on phones and have it all be seamless. And the big lesson there is responsive HTML5 is really hard. Has anyone here tried to work in that? Are you loving it? No, it's really, 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 really hard. So there's a lot of things about it. There are technical difficulties in terms of every platform is implemented differently. And so you have to make all these, just something as simple as I'd like to play a sound effect is going to be totally different on Android, on iPad, on Mac OS, on Chrome browser. So you have to deal with all these technical headaches. And then you have all the design headaches of we need to make this work at any size and any resolution and with big buttons and with little buttons and with mouse. And don't forget, it's 3-year-olds using the mouse, so make that work too. So we're finding it's possible, but oof, it's challenging. And so if you're gonna go that direction, like just be battle ready when you're gonna do it, and be ready to make compromises. Anyway, so that's the end of my bit. Do we have time for a couple questions? I think we have time for a couple. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Questions.
Oh wait, don't be shy, because if you're in a room where Jesse Schell says that HTML5 is really, 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 really hard, holy.
Let's see. Yeah.
So how do you measure the effectiveness of what you're teaching this age group? How are you assessing what you're doing, what they do?
Right. No, it's a really good question. In terms of particularly, so I can speak for the games. For the games, it has multiple parts. Some of it is just how do we feel? Does it feel right? But we rely a lot on the experts at the Fred Rogers Company in terms of are they perceiving that it's right? We haven't gotten to the level of formal testing. It's something we've all been talking about in terms of trying to get that formal testing across. Some of these things are quite hard to sort of measure and put into formal testing. But so far, our technique has been very much to rely on people with decades of expertise. If they say it's working, we say, well, okay.
No clear post-testing yet?
Not yet.
We have some in the works.
And we do a lot of, everything that we do is formative to make sure that it's working for the show. And so we're excited that they're working with a group to do summative that we're not involved in, so they can really test to see whether or not it's working. And we're getting anecdotal information from parents that kids are using it by themselves in the play corner to navigate sharing situations, to navigate their anger, to tell their friends to try a new food because it might taste good.
And I think we can't overestimate the feedback that we've gotten from parents. Angela's done a brilliant job of creating the show in such a way that every half hour features a strategy. And every half hour has 2 different stories that are 11 minutes long. So you're providing 2 different contexts for the same strategy. And the strategy is musical, and in each of those 2 11-minute stories, there's an original song that includes that strategy in it. So it's been remarkable to see kids watch a single half hour and walk away knowing that strategy. They've heard it multiple times, in multiple ways, in multiple contexts. And we hear from parents all the time saying, thank you. This episode helped me get through my day. It helped me, we're dealing with learning to go to the potty, we're dealing with sharing, we're dealing with separation anxiety, we're dealing with so many different, dealing with disappointment. And your songs, which are short and memorable, help us, and it's been remarkable, the feedback that we've gotten.
My daughter loves the show. Media consumption itself is sort of a broad issue with this age group. And how do you think through what a healthy media diet is as a cater to media and help kids themselves understand what moderation is?
That's always a difficult question. It's right now, the fact that it is streamed so much on mobile devices is exciting for us. It seems to be very helpful to a lot of parents, but there is also that possibility of kids watching too much of it. That's the challenge of public media and educational media, is you want it to be popular, but how popular can you let it be? You don't want it to be too popular, because too much of anything is too much. So at some point you do have to rely on parents to have control over their kids' media use.
And I always like to say that it's about the content, right? So I always think you can never read too many books, no matter what you're reading. And because we do so much research and there's so much in our shows, I do feel that if you're making the choice for the content, so we've been doing a lot to talk to parents about differentiating between content that's out there to make sure that they're choosing and building that healthy diet.
That was actually a great segue to our next speakers. Thank you so much.